When Clint Eastwood stepped onto the red carpet at a high-profile Hollywood event, dressed in his usual understated style, nobody expected it to spark a media firestorm. But within hours, the industry's so-called elites turned a harmless piece of jewelry into a scandal, ridiculing a man they thought was just another outdated relic of the past. What they didn't realize was that Clint Eastwood wasn't the kind of man to apologize or back down. And what happened next became a defining moment that Hollywood would never forget. The camera panned across the dimly lit saloon, the scent of aged whiskey and old leather lingering in the air. But this wasn't a movie set. This was Clint Eastwood's reality, a living legend, a man who had shaped Hollywood on his own terms and never looked back. For over 6 decades, Clint had embodied the kind of man the world seemed to be running low on: gritty, disciplined, and unapologetically himself. He was the last of a dying breed, a throwback to an era where a man's word meant something and respect was earned, not given. From his early days in spaghetti westerns to his later years directing films that Hollywood was too afraid to make, Clint had never wavered. He didn't chase trends, he didn't bow to industry politics, and he sure as hell didn't apologize for being exactly who he was. That's what set him apart. Even as Hollywood shifted, embracing new ideologies and narratives, Clint stood firm. While younger actors carefully curated their public personas to fit the latest cause or movement, he remained exactly the same: a cowboy, a storyteller, and above all, a man who didn't give a damn what people thought. Critics had tried to cancel him before. They labeled him outdated, called his movies problematic. But Clint didn't engage. He didn't explain himself. He just kept working, letting his legacy speak louder than the noise. And the truth was, despite all the backlash, the people still loved him. His films continued to rake in millions. His name still commanded respect. And maybe that's why when Clint Eastwood walked into that Hollywood event, dressed in his usual understated style, black boots, a simple button-down, and a well-worn jacket, he didn't think twice about the crucifix around his neck. To him, it was just a part of who he was. To Hollywood, it was something else entirely, because within hours, a storm was brewing, and the media was about to make the mistake of thinking they could humiliate Clint Eastwood. They had no idea what was coming next. The flash of cameras was relentless, a blinding assault from every angle. Clint Eastwood barely blinked. He had walked through tougher storms than this. The event was one of Hollywood's biggest nights. Red carpets, designer gowns, overpriced champagne and delicate flutes. It was the kind of place where celebrities made their carefully crafted political statements, where the right words in the right moment could turn someone into a headline. But Clint? He wasn't there for any of that. He had been invited to present an honorary award, a rare moment where even the Hollywood elite had to acknowledge his legendary status. He had no intention of making waves, no agenda, no carefully planned speech, just another night, another honor, another moment to remind the world that he was still very much Clint Eastwood. Then someone noticed it, a small silver crucifix hanging from his neck. The cameras zoomed in, the murmurs started, and just like that, a piece of jewelry became a scandal. At first, it was just whispers. A few side eyes from industry insiders, a couple of raised eyebrows from reporters. But the moment the first tweet went out, everything changed. Why is Clint Eastwood wearing a crucifix? What's he trying to say? Ugh, another old Hollywood relic refusing to evolve. We really still glorify this guy? Within minutes, the narrative was set. It wasn't just an accessory anymore. It was a statement, one that Hollywood's self-appointed moral gatekeepers weren't going to let slide. The media headlines came in fast and ruthless. Clint Eastwood's red carpet appearance sparks controversy over religious symbolism. Does Eastwood's crucifix send a problematic message in modern Hollywood? Out of touch? Clint Eastwood's jewelry choice ignites debate. And then came the pundits, the late-night hosts, the social media warriors, each one more desperate than the last to paint Clint as something he wasn't. The irony? Clint still hadn't said a word. But that didn't matter, because in today's Hollywood, silence is a crime, and wearing a cross without issuing a prepared statement was apparently a rebellion. What they didn't realize, what they never seemed to realize, is that Clint Eastwood wasn't the kind of man you back into a corner. And when he finally did speak, it wouldn't just shut them down, it would break the internet. It started as a whisper, then it became a murmur. And within hours, it was an all-out media firestorm. Clint Eastwood, one of Hollywood's last standing legends, had committed the unforgivable sin he had worn a crucifix in public. By the time the sun rose the next morning, every major news outlet had something to say. Headlines twisted what had been a simple wardrobe choice into a cultural battlefield. Clint Eastwood's religious symbolism, a defiant statement or outdated tradition. Hollywood legend sparks debate over faith and relevance in modern America. Why Clint Eastwood's red carpet moment feels like a step backwards. Cable news panels lit up, featuring smug commentators who barely concealed their glee. This is just another example of Hollywood's older generation refusing to evolve, one analyst claimed. It's not about the crucifix itself, it's about the message it sends, another insisted. Is Clint Eastwood making a political statement? If so, what exactly is he trying to say? It was the same tired routine: manufacture outrage, frame a false narrative, and let social media do the rest. And social media? It took the bait. Twitter was a battlefield. Verified accounts, activists, and self-righteous influencers lined up to take their shots. We really need to stop pretending Clint Eastwood is some kind of hero. The guy's been problematic for decades. This is just the latest proof. Wearing a crucifix in today's climate, he knew exactly what he was doing. Comment sections erupted with debates. On one side, people defended Clint, calling the backlash absurd and hypocritical. On the other, critics attacked, claiming his actions were provocative and out of touch. And through it all, Clint Eastwood remained completely, utterly silent. No statements, no damage control, no carefully worded PR response. Because while the media desperately wanted a reaction, Clint Eastwood wasn't the kind of man who played by their rules. But Hollywood? Hollywood was just getting started. Late-night talk shows smelled blood in the water. That night, the usual suspects, smug, suit-clad hosts who thrived on punching down at their guests, took their first swings. So, Clint Eastwood walked the red carpet wearing a crucifix, one host quipped, pausing for effect, because apparently, starring in movies from the 70s wasn't enough of a reminder that he's old. The audience roared with laughter. Another host leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Look, I respect Clint, I really do, but I don't know, man. You're at a Hollywood event, not leading a church sermon. The camera panned to an audience trained to laugh on cue, reinforcing the illusion that the whole world agreed with their manufactured outrage. But the worst was yet to come. A well-known progressive actor, one of those Hollywood stars who built a career not on talent, but on saying the right things at the right time, took to Twitter with a scathing post. I grew up watching Clint Eastwood's movies, but I can't respect someone who uses outdated symbols to make a divisive statement. We should be moving forward, not clinging to the past. The tweet racked up thousands of likes within minutes, with blue-check accounts eager to pile on. Eastwood's always been stuck in the past. This just proves it. Imagine being rich and famous and still choosing to be oppressed. Maybe it's time for Hollywood to finally move on from Clint Eastwood. The narrative was locked in. Clint Eastwood wasn't just a man who wore a crucifix. He was now a symbol of everything Hollywood wanted to erase. And still, he didn't say a word. The media machine had done its job. The headlines were written, the TV segments were produced, the social media warriors had screamed into the void. But what none of them realized was that Clint Eastwood didn't need to say a word to win this fight. Because when he finally did respond, it wouldn't just shut them up, it would shatter their entire illusion. The backlash had been swift, loud, and coordinated. The media had done their best to turn Clint Eastwood into the latest example of why old Hollywood needed to go. But they underestimated something. The American people weren't buying it. Within hours, the narrative started slipping through their fingers. While journalists and late-night hosts smugly took their shots, something else was happening in real time. People were fighting back. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever the controversy spread, so did the outrage against the outrage. Since when is wearing a crucifix controversial? One tweet read, racking up over 100,000 likes. Another user wrote, "Funny how Hollywood celebrates diversity, unless that diversity includes traditional values." The more the media pushed the idea that Clint was out of touch, the more everyday Americans called them out for their blatant hypocrisy. Conservative commentators weighed in almost immediately. Tucker Carlson, "Clint Eastwood wears a crucifix and suddenly he's divisive?" Meanwhile, the same industry that worships at the altar of moral relativism wants to lecture us on what's offensive? Please. Ben Shapiro, "Let me get this straight. Hollywood can shove its progressive agenda down America's throat 24/7, but an 80-year-old actor wears a small cross and it's suddenly a problem? Spare me." It wasn't just the commentators, though. Firefighters, veterans, single mothers, blue-collar workers, people who actually lived in the real world, started speaking up. One viral Facebook post from a retired Marine summed it up best. Clint Eastwood wears a cross, and people freak out. Meanwhile, we have celebrities openly mocking faith, tradition, and family values, and that's fine. The world has lost its mind. And the more the media tried to control the story, the more obvious it became. This wasn't just about Clint Eastwood. This was about something bigger. The battle lines had been drawn, and whether Hollywood liked it or not, they weren't the ones controlling the narrative anymore. For days, the media machine had been running at full speed. The think pieces had been written. The talk show hosts had performed their monologues. The Twitter warriors had exhausted their outrage. And through it all, Clint Eastwood had said nothing. That silence had only made them more desperate. They needed him to engage, to defend himself, to give them something to twist into a new headline. Then, finally, it happened. Clint Eastwood agreed to an interview. No Hollywood fluff, no carefully orchestrated PR stunt, just a quiet sit-down conversation with an independent journalist who had covered his career for decades. The cameras rolled. The reporter leaned in. "So, Clint," he began, "there's been a lot of controversy around you lately. People are saying your crucifix was a political statement. Some are calling it divisive. What do you say to that?" Eastwood didn't flinch. He didn't rush to defend himself. He simply sat back in his chair, folded his hands, and gave the simplest answer possible. "I've lived long enough to see trends come and go," he said, his voice steady. "I don't change for them." Silence. The weight of his words hung in the air, heavier than any monologue, any Twitter thread, any think piece. The journalist hesitated, almost caught off guard. "So you're saying this wasn't a statement?" Eastwood smirked. "No more than breathing is a statement." The simplicity of it was devastating. No anger, no defensiveness, just the unshakable confidence of a man who had seen it all, outlived every critic, and knew that none of this nonsense mattered in the grand scheme of things. The clip spread like wildfire. People latched onto his words, quoting them in memes, printing them on t-shirts, sharing them with captions like, "Clint Eastwood just ended cancel culture in one sentence. A real man doesn't apologize for who he is. I don't change for trends. Iconic." Meanwhile, the media, stunned into silence, scrambled for a new angle. They had spent days attacking him, waiting for a defensive reaction, a meltdown, anything they could exploit. Instead, Clint Eastwood had given them nothing. And in doing so, he had won. Because in a world where everyone is desperate to prove themselves, there's nothing more powerful than a man who has nothing to prove. The reporter, sensing that Clint wasn't rattled, leaned in closer, eyebrows raised, voice dropping to that low, measured tone journalists use when they think they're about to make history. "But Clint," he continued, "surely you understand why people reacted the way they did. Some feel that wearing a crucifix in a public setting, especially in Hollywood, sends a message. Given the divisiveness in today's world, do you think you should have been more mindful of that?" A lesser man might have stumbled, might have given a long-winded, carefully rehearsed answer, trying to appease both sides. Clint Eastwood? He just took a slow sip of his coffee. The silence stretched. The reporter waited, expecting an explanation, a justification, something. Instead, Clint just smirked, that classic, knowing smirk, the one he had perfected over decades of outwitting outlaws, politicians, and critics alike. And then, in a voice so casual it almost sounded amused, he dropped the line that broke the room in half. "If a piece of jewelry scares you this much, maybe the problem isn't the jewelry." Boom! The air shifted. The camera crew stopped moving. The reporter's confident expression flickered, just for a second. Because what could you possibly say to that? It was perfect, so simple, so direct, that any argument against it would sound ridiculous. The journalist opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands twitched as if reaching for some follow-up question, some desperate attempt to regain control. Nothing came, because in that moment Clint Eastwood had said everything that needed to be said. The interview wrapped up soon after. No dramatic walkout, no shouting match, no controversy to milk. Just one man, one sentence, and the entire media narrative collapsing in real time. But the real impact? That wouldn't happen in the studio. It would happen online, where the moment would become unstoppable. The clip hit the internet within minutes. Someone in the studio audience had uploaded it raw, completely unedited. Just Clint Eastwood, smirking over his coffee, dropping one of the most devastating comebacks in recent history. By the time the official interview aired, the damage was already done. The internet had erupted. #, Clint Clapback was trending worldwide. Memes flooded Twitter and Instagram. One showed Clint sitting calmly while the journalist looked flustered with the caption, "This man just ended cancel culture in 3 seconds." Another took an old Western poster, replacing the title with "The Good, the Bad, and the Journalist Who Should Have Stayed Home." YouTube was flooded with reaction videos, commentators breaking down the moment, pausing to let the weight of Clint's words sink in. "Yo," one streamer laughed, hands on his head. "That's it. That's the tweet. That's the whole argument. He just shut down the entire debate." On Facebook, older fans reminisced about a time when men like Clint Eastwood weren't the minority. "This is why I respect Clint," one post read. "He doesn't care what's popular, he just speaks the truth." The more the media tried to spin the story, the worse it got. Some outlets ran damage control headlines. Clint Eastwood's controversial comment sparks debate online. Actor dismisses criticism over religious symbolism in interview. But it was too late. No one was debating. No one was offended. They were cheering. And Hollywood? For the first time in a long time, it felt like they weren't in control of the narrative anymore. Because Clint Eastwood had done what no one else in Hollywood dared to do. He had refused to apologize, and the world loved him for it. The moment Clint Eastwood's words hit the internet, everything changed. What had started as a media hit piece had now spiraled out of their control. Mainstream outlets, once so confident in their smug takedown of a Hollywood legend, suddenly found themselves on the defensive. They tried everything. Some reporters backpedaled, claiming Clint's statement had been taken out of context. Eastwood's comment wasn't meant as an attack, but rather a reflection on media sensationalism. Others tried to downplay the backlash, pretending it wasn't happening. While the internet may be debating this, most Americans aren't actually that concerned. Then there were those who doubled down, hoping they could regain control of the narrative. Eastwood's response was defiant, but does it ignore the very real concerns people have about outdated symbols in Hollywood? But it was too late. The internet had already decided who won. The clips, the memes, the reaction videos, they were everywhere. The moment had cemented itself in pop culture. And worst of all for the media? The people weren't listening to them anymore. For years, they had dictated the conversation, told audiences what to be outraged about, who to cancel, and who to celebrate. But Clint Eastwood had flipped the script. By saying nothing at first, by refusing to play the game, he had forced them to chase the narrative, not control it. And now? Now they were scrambling, their credibility slipping with every failed attempt to spin the story. Because for the first time in a long time, a Hollywood legend had stood his ground, and the world was standing with him. The Clint Eastwood controversy had been a test. Would Hollywood fall in line and condemn him, or would anyone have the courage to speak out? At first, most celebrities stayed silent, afraid of backlash from the industry gatekeepers. But then, one broke ranks. A fellow actor, a respected veteran in the industry, took to Instagram with a simple post. A picture of him and Clint on a movie set, arms crossed, both wearing crucifixes. The caption? "I know Clint Eastwood. I've worked with him. And let me tell you something, this man has done more for people in this business than half the hypocrites calling him problematic." The post exploded. People flooded the comments, thanking him for having the guts to stand with Clint. Then another actor spoke out, then another. Then a former stuntman who shared a story about how Clint had personally stepped in when a production company tried to underpay the crew. Clint Eastwood isn't just a great filmmaker, he's a great man. The fact that people are attacking him over a damn necklace tells you everything you need to know about Hollywood today. And just like that, the floodgates opened. More and more stories surfaced, painting a picture of a man who had spent decades quietly helping people, never asking for recognition. Meanwhile, Clint's critics weren't backing down. A handful of younger celebrities tried to keep the outrage alive, tweeting statements like, "Respect to Clint Eastwood as a filmmaker, but we have to recognize when certain icons refuse to evolve with the times." Hollywood shouldn't be a place where outdated values are given a platform. But every time they tried to drag Clint, it only fueled the backlash further. The comment sections under their tweets were brutal. "You guys love to talk about tolerance until someone wears a cross. Imagine being this fragile over a piece of jewelry. Clint Eastwood has more integrity in one finger than your whole career." It was becoming clear. The more they attacked Clint, the stronger his support became. Because this wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about Hollywood's hypocrisy, about real strength, about a culture that had spent too long telling people what they were allowed to believe. And Clint Eastwood? He wasn't just winning the debate. He was changing it entirely. Chapter 11, a deeper issue emerges. At first, the controversy was just about Clint Eastwood and a crucifix. But now? Now it was something bigger. The more people dissected what had happened, the more they started asking harder questions, the kind Hollywood wasn't prepared to answer. Why is faith considered controversial, but other bold statements are celebrated? Why is it acceptable for celebrities to wear political slogans, radical messages, or provocative imagery, but a simple crucifix sparks outrage? Cable news segments debated it. YouTube commentators tore into it. Even late-night hosts, the same ones who mocked Clint just days before, were now shifting their tone. It wasn't just conservative voices speaking out anymore. Some moderate and even liberal commentators, people who had no particular allegiance to Clint or his beliefs, started pointing out the hypocrisy. Look, you don't have to agree with Clint Eastwood on everything, but let's be real. This is insane. If a younger celebrity had walked the red carpet wearing a symbol of any other religion, Hollywood would be calling it brave and important. Podcasts, Twitter Spaces, and independent media latched onto the bigger issue. Hollywood's selective tolerance was being exposed in real time. This isn't about a crucifix, this is about control. People started compiling examples. Celebrities who had worn controversial symbols, pushed divisive statements, and been applauded for it. A-list stars had worn shirts with provocative political messages, no backlash. Musicians had shown up in religiously offensive outfits, no backlash. Athletes had openly mocked faith on national television, no backlash. But Clint Eastwood wears a simple cross? Suddenly, it's a problem. Even people who didn't consider themselves religious started questioning what was really happening. Was this really about Clint Eastwood, or was it about a deeper agenda? And if Hollywood got away with attacking a man as respected and untouchable as Eastwood, who would be next? The conversation had shifted. This wasn't just about Clint anymore. This was about power, influence, and the people who decide which beliefs are acceptable. And Hollywood? They were losing control of the narrative. Hollywood waited for Clint's next move. They expected him to release a statement, maybe even clarify his words, do some soft damage control. That's how it usually worked. A celebrity steps out of line, there's outrage, and eventually they bend the knee. But Clint Eastwood? He did the one thing they never expected. He did nothing. No tweets, no press releases, no interviews. Instead, he did what Clint Eastwood has always done. He kept moving forward. A few days after the controversy hit its peak, Clint was spotted in public, grabbing coffee at a small diner in Carmel, California, where he's lived for decades. And around his neck, the same crucifix. Not hidden, not removed, right there in plain sight. A fan took a picture and uploaded it with the caption, "Still Clint, still standing." The photo exploded online. People immediately respected him even more. No grandstanding, no victim narrative, no dramatic defiance. Just Clint Eastwood living his life as if the entire controversy never happened. Because to him, it didn't matter. And that's what made it so powerful. They wanted to break him. Instead, he didn't even flinch. You know you've won when your biggest response is just going about your day. A real man doesn't need to explain himself. Hollywood had expected Clint to engage, defend, fight back. Instead, he just kept being Clint Eastwood. And that's why, even in silence, he won. The Clint Eastwood controversy was supposed to be just another Hollywood takedown. The media had played this game 1,000 times before. Target a public figure, manufacture outrage, watch them crumble. But this time, it backfired spectacularly. The internet had overwhelmingly sided with Clint, and the media's spin wasn't working anymore. Then, something quietly happened, but people noticed. A major media outlet, one that had originally published a scathing hit piece on Clint's crucifix, silently removed the article from their website. No retraction, no apology, no acknowledgement that they had overplayed their hand. Just gone. Of course, the internet never forgets. Screenshots of the deleted article spread like wildfire, with people calling out the media's embarrassing retreat. You don't delete an article unless you know you lost. They really thought they could rewrite history, huh? Not this time. Meanwhile, public trust in Hollywood's moral authority was shrinking fast. People were tired of celebrities who lectured them about morality while living in gated mansions. Tired of media outlets that claimed to support freedom of expression until someone expressed the wrong thing. Tired of a system that only tolerated certain beliefs while demonizing others. The backlash wasn't just about Clint anymore. It was about Hollywood's entire credibility. And for once, the media wasn't controlling the story. They were the story. They had picked the wrong fight, and now they were losing. Days turned into weeks. The controversy that had once dominated the news cycle started to fade away. The media had moved on, shifting their focus to the next manufactured outrage, the next celebrity who dared to step out of line. But Clint Eastwood, he hadn't changed. No apologies, no clarifications, no damage control, just Clint Eastwood, as he always was, unshaken, unapologetic, and untouchable. When asked about the controversy during a rare public appearance, he simply shrugged. "I don't tell people what to believe, I just live by what I believe." That was it. No long speech, no grandstanding, just the truth. And that's why people respected him even more. In an age where celebrities crumble under the slightest pressure, Clint Eastwood had stood firm. His legacy? Untouchable. Because at the end of the day, people don't remember the headlines. They don't remember the outrage. They remember who stood tall when it mattered most. And Clint Eastwood? He'll be remembered forever. The Clint Eastwood controversy should have been just another hit piece, just another Hollywood takedown. Instead, it became a symbol, not just of one man standing his ground, but of something much bigger, a moment that forced people to wake up. Because this wasn't really about a crucifix. It wasn't about a necklace or a red carpet moment, or even Clint Eastwood himself. It was about control. It was about a culture that had spent years dictating what people were allowed to say, what they were allowed to believe, and how they were allowed to express it. And for the first time in a long time, someone refused to play along. Clint didn't shout. He didn't argue. He didn't fight for approval. He simply stood firm. And that shook the entire system. Because if one man could stand his ground and win, what else had the media been lying about? People started asking harder questions. Why is faith controversial, but radical ideologies are praised? Why are certain beliefs constantly attacked, while others are treated as sacred? Why does Hollywood claim to celebrate diversity, except when it's a diversity of thought? The media had spent years convincing people that they were alone, that their beliefs were outdated, that they needed to fall in line or be erased. But now people weren't so sure anymore. Because if Clint Eastwood, a man with nothing to prove, nothing to gain, and no reason to bend, could stare them down and win, maybe, just maybe, others could too. And that's the real lesson. Real strength isn't about shouting the loudest. It isn't about playing the victim or forcing people to agree with you. Real strength is standing firm in what you believe, even when the world tries to shake you. So now, the question isn't about Clint Eastwood anymore. It's about you. What do you stand for? Because in the end, the world won't remember the noise. It will remember the ones who never bent to pressure. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more brutal.